Welcome everyone to this LinkedIn Live session on digitalizing wind energy ecosystem. My name is Utkarsh Srivastava and I'm your host today. There is no doubt that the transition to net zero emission has already begun and the world is coming together to make it happen. Wind energy is leading this transition, but its potential hinges upon scaling of modularization, digitalization, and hybridization approaches. Wind energy OEMs, developers, operators, and their suppliers need to digitalize their entire value chain and ecosystem to overcome operational challenges, speed up development, as well as reduce cost. The question is, could digitalization of the wind energy value chain drive scalability and help the wind energy become a cost efficient and viable energy source on a truly global scale? To discuss more on how digital threads are important to make the wind energy ecosystem more cost efficient and scalable. Today we have with us a panel of experts. Let me introduce you first to Mark Caldwell, Vice President, Vestas Wind Systems. At Vestas Wind Systems, Mark Caldwell is responsible for determining the company's Industry 4.0 roadmap and adoption. Mark believes that there is no easy way to achieve business transformation. Mark, welcome on this show. Thank you for joining us today.
And thank you very much for that.
We also have with us Dr. Urs Neumer, partner at Roland Berger. Dr. Urs works at Roland Berger as a partner in the Competence Center for Industrial Products and Services. He's an industry expert in capital goods, in particular power generation and transmission equipment. Dr. Urs, thank you for joining this show today.
Thank you. It is a pleasure. Thank you, Utkarsh.
We also have Mark Lobo, who is the Vice President of Product Management, responsible for PLM product management at PTC. Mr. Lobo has been at PTC for the last 20 years, working on different product areas. He's joining us from the US today.
Hey, Utkarsh. Thanks, everybody. Glad to be here.
And last but not the least, we have Rajkumar Ravindranathan, fondly known as Raj, who is Chief Business Officer at L&T Technology Services. He's passionate about sustainability initiatives and work with customers to achieve their sustainability goals through digital transformation. Raj, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
If you have any questions for our panelists, please put them in the chat box and my team will flag the questions to me. I can see that we have over 400 participants who have joined via LinkedIn and Zoom links. So without any further ado, let us get started and find out the mantra for digitalizing the entire value chain with experts who have been there and done that. So Dr. Urs, allow me to start the session with your views first on how has the wind turbine industry evolved in recent years? And if you could share some views on what are the challenges the wind energy ecosystem is facing today?
So the wind energy industry is a new industry, and still it has consolidated very quickly. There were around 2000, more than 100 manufacturers outside China, and now we talk about less than 10 manufacturers. So it is an unprecedented decline in actors in this field. And this went hand in hand with a strong decline in the prices. So costs have gone down significantly, and this has impact on the levelized cost of energy, which is the most important metrics to measure the performance. It went down by more than 6% per annum, and this has been driven by configurable products and a limited degree, but still there is some customization in it. However, the industry profited tremendously from that. Let's do a distinction between onshore and offshore. Onshore costs went down dramatically, and today onshore wind turbines have reached a price level where they are fully competitive to conventional sources of energy generation. This is the so-called grid parity. Offshore is different. Offshore is still more expensive than conventional sources of electricity. However, there are many cases, in many countries, there is a certain preference for offshore because it can't be seen it does not do damage to the fuse. So offshore is not yet competitive. However, it is favored by many governments. I'm sure, and everybody's assured, that the cost pressure will continue in the next years. And this will have dramatic impact on the industry, where everything has been tried to get costs down in the past. The demand will further drive bigger designs. The number of units will probably be stable. The entire ecosystem, and now it also talk about operators, about suppliers and all the like, all will keep their focus on maintaining costs low and keeping it further down. Probably service and operations will get even more in focus. And this is something which will have an impact on the design of the wind turbines. In general, the wind turbine industry has digitized for long. However, they now enter the next phase of digitalization. And this digitalization will be characterized by an end-to-end perspective, and end-to-end in both meanings that it could have. On the one hand, incorporating suppliers and customers, and on the other hand, an end-to-end perspective along the entire life cycle of a turbine. So this is in a nutshell the trends we see. It is a continuation, but to some extent driven by digitization, it will be a step into a more fierce development.
Thank you, Dr. Hurst, for setting the context with such great insights. I would also like to request Mark Caldwell to share his views on the transition of the renewable energy sector and the road ahead. Mark, anything you would like to add?
Yes, I've had the joy of being in the industry for, I think, 17 years now. And it's been exactly to the point of what was just stated. We have grown enormously. I mean, things that we thought were impossible, we're doing today. Things that we didn't understand then, we're doing today. But the challenges have only increased, and the complexity has only gone up, and it's gone up continuously. With often with a great hope that it doesn't. And we have continually had to look at solutions to deal with that complexity, and that's just accelerating and accelerating. And we find ourselves really pressured to be in front of it as much as possible. And Vestas does an excellent job at that. We are a market leader. We take pride in being a market leader, and that really flows into most of the developments we do around PLM and IoT and other topics in this area. So I can only reinforce that it's a challenging world, but it's a very rewarding industry to be in, and a very happy challenge we take on.
There's no doubt it's a very exciting industry to be in. You talked about the complications in the industry and the complexities. How would you approach the delivery of customer value and experience?
Well, we definitely focus on the customer at all times. Vestas offers basically every solution we can to the customer to make sure we maximize their business case. And that results in a fairly complex environment we work in. We have to support sales directly of the product to the customer without installation. We do it with installation. We do service for short periods of time. We do service for 20 years plus. And we do everything in between. We have all kinds of customers, from customers that buy one wind farm at one time, but own it for a long period of time. We have investors who are buying these things for very long periods of time and expect very stable returns. It's across the board, many variants of customer and customer demand. So we have taken a lot of focus on ensuring we can offer a product that really satisfies, a product offering that satisfies all of those corners. So we have a very configurable product. We have quite a wide variety of variants that we can offer that really tune the performance directly to that customer to really get every last measure of performance out of that individual installation. And that has changed over the years. We looked at wind parks as a total. We're moving really towards the individual location and optimizing every single installation we can. And of course, that brings quite a lot of complexity when we operate in over 88 countries with fairly complex logistics, moving large amounts of material around the world to really satisfy all these demands. And plus, at the same time, trying to address the future plans that we have of broader product offerings, more digitized product offerings to enable our customers to get as much success and as much value out of our product offering as we can.
All very fascinating, Mark. Let me bring in Raj here and ask him, Raj, from your experience of advising CXOs and speaking of customer value and experience, and working with different industries on digital transformation, what advice can you provide to wind energy players?
Sure, Utkarsh. See, I think digital is the easier part, right? The transformation is always the toughest. And if you look at the digital, every company should begin with the larger picture, if you will, right? They need to have a digital ambition. They need to have a clear view on how they're going to create the economic value, what impact a balance sheet or an income statement would have by taking on a digital program or a project, if you will, right? So looking at the digital technologies available today, it's very easy to look at where in a project creation or project operation that digital technologies can help. For example, let's say mesoscale data, you can create a very enriched AI-based model for site selection, right? And if you're building, analyzing, and data cleansing, let's say wind atlases, the time required for data cleansing and all of that can be reduced up to about 10 to 20%, if you will. Then, of course, usage of drones for visual inspection and the whole digital twin methodology. I think a lot of operators today use digital twin for, at best, remote monitoring and diagnosis, maybe for predicting failures as well. But I think there is a whole lot of opportunity to further optimize the operations by, building prescriptive, models, and also making an entire wind farm autonomous, more and more autonomous, I would say. You could have the twins operate the, field management systems or farm control systems and, balance the power production versus the fatigue and all of that, right? So I think there is several opportunities to use digital technologies in making sure that the entire project delivery and operation is streamlined. But the transformation part, as I said, is tougher, right? Oftentimes what we see as a company, and we help customers overcome are a few, challenges. One is a lack of standardized platform and technologies across the organization, building a technology foundation, if you will. The second is we see customers caught up in the cycle of POCs, right? So inability to scale and commercialize. That's another area that we help customers with from other industries. Then the third is difficulty in prioritizing the right use cases. Sometimes, the customers chase, high value use cases, which takes them long time to implement. A lot of changes needs to happen in the organization, and the will and the resolve to continue through it fails. So it's very important to choose the right use cases. The fourth one is the complex development needs. I mean, you need, a CIO's organization or a CDO's organization needs wide variety of skills today. IoT architects, AI, data scientists, full stack developers, and so on and so forth. The fifth is digital know-how, right? So today, in today's world, you need business savvy technologists and technology savvy business folks, right? So to imagine what is the art of possible with technology and vice versa, if you will. And the last couple of things, change management, I think that's everyone is aware, making the organization adopt new ways of working, while at the same time, operating the business as usual. The whole change management is difficult. And finally, dealing with legacy, right? Simple things like when you sensorize your products, the network traffic is going to increase. So you need to upgrade your legacy systems and infrastructure and so on and so forth. So I think there are several industries that has gone ahead that you can look to learn from in making digital transformation faster in the wind energy sector, I believe.
I like what you said, digital is easy and transformation is the hard part. And it becomes more complex and difficult when you are looking at the entire value chain, but definitely rewarding. So let me bring in Mark Lobo from PTC and ask him, Mark, what challenges are you seeing for digitalizing the value chain end to end, from design to engineering to manufacturing to services?
Right, Utkarsh. Yeah, thank you. Just to build on, what Raj and Dr. Urs and Mark Caldwell spoke about, the customer challenges that we are hearing as we speak to our customers about the digital transformation journey. And as Raj said, the digital part is the easy part, and then the transformation is the much harder part. But even within the digital side of things, there are three common areas of opportunity that we hear when we talk to customers that come in to meet with us, and on how they can look to improve and digitize the value chain. So the first one is what we call digital product traceability. It's really an important part of the digital thread. And what we're seeing is a lot of global players, especially the oil and gas companies, for example, have placed very high operational requirements on wind energy companies. So governments and customers all want to look at that data, right? Manual handover and duplicate data and all these different systems that Raj was talking about, those IT systems. I mean, it really makes it impossible to meet the customer requirements and regulations when you don't have this traceability. So that's number one we're hearing. The second one is integration into the supply chain. So large parts of production today, whether it's the wind energy or all other discrete manufacturing, is becoming more and more outsourced and is highly dependent on the global supply chain. I mean, we all know what happened last year, when COVID hit and the supply chain kind of came to a grinding halt, especially with China. So companies are challenged to do more of this integration into their suppliers and their customers, right? And that's we heard Mark talk about that as well from Vestas' perspective. The third area, we all know this and we say it, is quality. And bad quality, really, a lack of a quality baseline is often the challenge when quality is in the heads of people and is not defined in the process. So I know there's a bunch of other things, challenges that we hear about, but I thought of highlighting these three. We hear about it all the time.
You talked about COVID-19. I'll come to COVID part later. Definitely need to touch upon that. But before, we also talked about digital product traceability. And I wanted to go to Mark Caldwell and ask him, I'm really keen to ask you about this, the material traceability program at Vestas, Mark. Our audience is keen to learn from your success story of enabling an end-to-end digital thread journey at Vestas. So tell us more about it.
Yeah, certainly. I think a lot of what Mark said is very on point. Vestas has been in the industry for many, many years, and as said earlier, we have had a digitized product for decades, and we have tens of thousands of products in the field that we have essentially real-time connections to streaming data for 15 years or more. And this has always been a tremendous value to us and our customers. But as the complexity in our industry has come along, as we've grown very, very rapidly, our global operations have grown very, very rapidly, a lot of these things that we were able to handle in the process with, let's say, manual processes or non-digitized processes, or having steps in between where we could convert things. A lot of this has really needed to come out. And years ago, Vestas looked at this and saw this challenge, and leadership at Vestas was really quite focused and understood that something had to significantly change. And we saw the challenges, and one of those core challenges was traceability. We had grown, we had done many great things, but at the same time, traceability demands just kept increasing and increasing and increasing. And we took a step back, and we did a very deep look at what is going on, where's the root of this, and we really took a very deep look at that. And we took a very hard decision to really fundamentally redo some of the core infrastructure we had and some of the core processes we had. Yes, they were very difficult to address, and we knew that would be very tough to try to do in a year. and it was almost silly to assume it could be done in a year. So at that point, we built roughly a 4 to 5 year program. And we set about building a plan to get us from where we were to where we wanted to be and take on some challenges people said were impossible to do, but necessary. And we took that challenge, and we spent 4 to 4.5 years working on that continuously with really dedicated focus to move the foundation of our data in our engineering organization, and that data that flows out into the organization through all the requisite interfaces into the value chain. And that brought us a lot of value at rationalizing that core data set to a very high degree. That journey has resulted in many issues we saw years ago just evaporating because the quality is there in that core master data. And many of the ancillary processes now have been able to kick off activities and kick off other projects that would have been impossible to do before. And that brings growth in value that is a tremendous payback. So the core project was value because we addressed root cause. The outcome was definite value, but also the possibility to do many things digitally that we couldn't do before. And that we've capitalized on that and kept a very robust set of activities ongoing since that program to continue building out what we do within our development function with our customer and out through our value chain to bring that product information out there to streamline operations, to bring better ways of working. And we continue to work on that roadmap very aggressively.
Mark, I can already see the questions coming on your journey of digital transformation and end-to-end digital thread. I think one of the questions that I can see in the chat is, how did you measure the ROI? You talked about it delivered tremendous value, but any additional information that you can share with the audience in terms of how did you measure it and what the ROI has been?
Of course we have to measure that, and we definitely looked at the first thing we did was really look at all the transactions across the value chain. Luckily, we have ERPs, we had systems in place already that allows you to do that. We looked at all of the transactions we have, and we looked at what basically builds up all of those transactions and said, when we look at these root causes, how do we believe they contribute to the number of transactions we have, the amount of time it takes to execute those transactions, and the amount of rework in those transactions. And then we built a business case on that basis to look at all the activity we do in different segments and what we believed would be resolved in a proportional basis on improving the core. And then we followed up on that. And really at the end of it, we were able to look back and see that some things we had made much more effective. Some places we actually increased the number of transactions, right? But holistically, the overall efficiency of it went up quite dramatically. And as I said, some things that we were dealing with prior, we don't even address anymore. We had places where we had to do rework, or we had coordination activities because of this inconsistent, let's say inconsistent view of our core data. Now it's rock solid consistent, and that allows us to be much more effective. Decisions are faster. Training is quite a bit faster, right? Because it's much more straightforward to approach, much more straightforward to understand and see the effect. But of course, that's the core, and there's a lot of other things we do based on that. And so, if you look at it, we look at it. There's still a ton to do. It's not that I come to work every day and say, "Wow, we fixed it all in that program." Certainly not. And because it's such a core thing, such a set of core things we fixed, it's actually to the user quite difficult to understand and see. But their baseline moved, and now we're able to come into those areas and execute projects that we couldn't execute before, and bring a lot of value. So many people have really much better ideas, and the ideas that come are much more sustainable. And that's what really personally makes me very happy about the journey we have, is because I see so many good ideas coming from the organization that I don't think would have come the way they come now. The organization can see things, and they come with things that really are very impressive about what we can do. And it's a tremendously exciting thing.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for sharing your journey with us. I will probably go and touch upon the services part another very important topic. And I'll invite Dr. Urs to share what role, Dr. Urs, you think the OEM players, services organization are playing as a driving force behind the digital transformation. Sorry, Dr. Urs, I think you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
as in many industries, money is typically earned in service. So service is a very important business for the OEMs. At the same time, as said, the whole focus of efficiency will also go into service and operations. And now it gets even more complex, as many costs in service are determined by the design of a turbine. Service is, of course, largely intertwined with the initial design. And this means that the serviceability in design is something which gets more important. And this is another aspect of certain digital tools. Of course, condition and remote monitoring have been key and will be key in future as well. We will see future developments in that. And that's what Raj said. This is the economic value, which is really the most important metric. Of course, also outages is something which needs to be avoided. Service is critical for ensuring that. And of course, what is true for onshore is particularly true for offshore. In offshore, keep in mind, often the teams, the crews have to be brought to the site via helicopters, which is extremely expensive. However, it creates value because it can ensure that there will be an outage. So as said, digitalization will become more end-to-end, and end-to-end here means from the design, from the beginning, the operations, the service until the very end of a wind farm. So, and this is all linked to what has been referred to by Mark and others as a digital product traceability. There is a nexus, there's a new perspective on it, end to end. And a final word, I started with saying profit is earned in service. If the OEMs do not succeed in providing first-class service, then the pirates will gain ground. And pirates are those who do it for less money, and they attack the service fees and the service margins. So there is extreme pressure to defend this area. Service is another battlefield in wind turbine.
Thank you, Dr. Urs. I think while we are on this services topic, I also see a question, and that question is, Mark Caldwell, to you, is: have your investments in data led to new revenue streams and offerings?
I think we have been able to do more hybrid work, integrating more things. We are obviously developing new products and looking in more new channels. But I would say that our focus on our core, it has been foundation first, and that means that we're working inside out. We are, when we do come to service, we are doing some very major activities in that area that are really quite exciting, and they're very possible because Vestas has had this foundation first focus. We can address them, and I think that we are bringing things into the market in that area.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And nothing is possible unless you really look at data. Data is the key. So let me ask Mark Lobo, what challenges are you seeing when it comes to product data? How can companies capitalize on the troves of data already existing within their systems?
Right, Utkarsh, I think people may have heard this term, data is the new oil. It's kind of relevant here though in this industry as well when we're talking about wind and sustainability. But down to the question of challenges that we're seeing. So we talk to a lot of customers about their challenges. But the one I'd like to highlight today is what we would call application infrastructure. And let me tell you what I mean by that. What we've seen is way too many companies have built their systems that tend to work for the experienced workforce, but they really don't work for the new generation that's coming in. These systems are really extremely complex, and you find information in all the strangest of places in the organization. When product documentation is in all of these completely separate systems, guess what? There is no change control on that. In fact, we sometimes joke here at PTC, but the most popular system for orchestrating product development is Microsoft Office. Most of the integration we're seeing is through Excel, through PowerPoint, Word, and then delivery through SharePoint and OneDrive. It's true. And that's part of the digitization digital thread is how do you get that with all the other systems? So going to the second question, which is what are some of the examples that we see companies capitalizing on the troves of all this existing data? So let me give 4 examples of that. Mark Caldwell talked about Vestas being having connections and to the products through IoT and sensors for the last 15 years. But the reality is that not as many industries are as connected to the physical products they produce. So there's a lot of opportunity for doing things like a models-based system engineering, where you reduce your dependence on building the physical prototype. And virtual prototyping, for example, can be done in AR in the production environment, by querying signals from the field, from a live turbine, for example. Just before you send a service technician, where Dr. Urs said service is that next frontier, we're seeing that as well. A second area we're seeing is combining SCADA and quality management, where we can take a lot of that historical data, run it through AI or ML to really gain insights that you can share back with all the stakeholders within the organization, whether it's the engineering folks and other folks as well. The third one is thinking about digital threads, implementing an engineering bill of material to manufacturing bill of material to service bill of material, and having that tight connection and traceability. And then relying on that configuration throughout this thread. So for example, to build work instructions, either for the shop floor, or guess what, when you're up there on 100 feet high on top of the turbine doing an actual service procedure, right? You could do that you get trained before that in 3D and AR. And then finally, I would say it's back to the fundamentals of traceability and change control. When you have all of this data in the system, then you can perform for example, a detailed where used analysis and truly assess the impact of a change, right? The earlier the change, the better. And it boils down to knowing the dependencies and the full scope of work. At the end, it helps planning and execution. So those are a couple of examples of where we see companies really capitalizing on data and using systems like PLM to do that.
Very interesting discussions, Mark. Thank you for sharing your insights. And I would encourage audience to keep sending us their questions through the chat box while I move on to the next part of the discussion. And I think it's important to touch upon COVID-19 impact on digitalization, while a lot has already been talked about. But recent events do tell us that the pandemic is not over yet. And it's important to talk about what we have learned over the past 12 months. So Raj, let me invite you, and from your experience of working with different industries, what changes are you seeing in the way energy companies are approaching digitalization, and what impact it will have on the manufacturing, digitalization, and localization?
Sorry, I was on mute. Sure. Look, I think COVID has taught all of us a lot of different things, but if you look at it from the manufacturing setup, and I will get to the energy in a little bit. See, the companies who were well on to the digitization journey, Industry 4.0 journey, fairly really well managed the crisis really well, with this during the COVID crisis, right? So that's very clear. But even those companies, almost 40% of them who thought that they had a successful Industry 4.0 implementation now think they don't. And that is primarily because all of those implementations were kept in mind or implemented with adding business value during business as usual, right? It wasn't built with the business continuity plan in mind at all. And then the whole other set of companies who were at the early stages of doing Industry 4.0, whether that is plant automation or end-to-end visibility, traceability, whatever that is, they could not progress much during this pandemic because of lack of resources, travel restrictions, and cash trap because of the economic condition as well, right? Now we see that beginning to take shape. A whole lot of companies are beginning to start investing in Industry 4.0. A bunch of different use cases. Bulk of them is about reducing manual labor, automation, remote operations, building resiliency of their operations, sometimes even over competitiveness, supply chain visibility and adaptability, and then, of course, digital twin for critical process and operations, right? So these are some of the use cases in top of mind. We see a lot of those projects kicking off as we speak. But as you said, it's not over yet. We don't know what future lies, but companies have certainly woken up to better prepare for such another, if should be another big wave, right? On the energy companies, that has been an industry with a lot of inertia, right? And if you look back, why so? It's the nature of their business and the people who are in influential positions in the organization, right? So energy companies have always been physically oriented, highly regulated sector. So engineer is the king, right, in those organizations. And they have an engineering mindset, perfect solutions, detailed planning and to the highest degree, and rigorous analysis and process. All those are the cultural norms in that company, right? As opposed to fast judgments, fail fast, learn fast, flexibility, all that is required in digital transformation. So energy companies have been really, really behind on a lot of energy, these digital transformation. But COVID has done two things. One, for the smaller individual suppliers, their cash and survival has been on top of their mind. So they have completely abandoned any projects on digital. For the larger companies who have the resources to weather the storm, COVID has done two things. One is it has underscored that the survival requires getting to the next level on cost and adaptability. And the second is the companies were forced to change the business as usual, right? So it has significantly lowered the barriers of change. So we see a lot of oil and gas, E&U companies investing significantly in digital energy transition and all of that as well.
Good. Thank you, Raj. Thanks for sharing. And I think as companies scale digital transformation post the pandemic, one of the key questions that I'm sure audience would be keen to understand is how do they select the right set of systems and tool chain for achieving digitalization objectives? So let me bring in Mark Lobo here. And from your experience, what are the main parameters that you think the wind ecosystem must consider while selecting their systems and tool chain?
Yeah, great question, Utkarsh. So as we've been helping customers on this digitalization journey for quite a while, it's coming down to a few fundamentals as they're evaluating all the technology options in front of them. So number one is, enabling more targeted solutions to really match the customer needs within the enterprise. So let me give a few examples of that. Earlier we were talking about product families and managing and expanding the number of variants for different markets, while at the same time lowering the number of components that go into these products. So that's an example. And another popular example we hear about is parts reuse and reducing parts proliferation. And when you talk about having more standardized components, it really enables efficiency and scale. And going back to that question asked earlier about ROI, this is really one of those easy wins we can see in measuring ROI as you're doing some of this digitalization. The third one in this area is supply chain integration. So take that opportunity to look at solutions that increase the overall effectiveness and bring the suppliers in earlier and really build partnerships with them through your offerings and solutions. So that's number one. The second one we want to talk about is look at digital offerings that span the ecosystem of the stakeholders within the company and outside the company. So, as I said earlier, the tools that are efficient for veterans may not actually be the same tools that are relevant and usable by the casual user. So you got to think of everyone, whether it's it's engineering or it's procurement. I mean, the same organization, the company, different needs for each of them. Another area that we're seeing with our tight heritage here at PTC around 3D CAD is break down complexity with these 3D CAD models. Making things visually is much easier to see differences, compare your as built versus as maintained versus what's out in the field. Very powerful ways to do that. So that's number two. The third one I would say is focus on traceability and change control. We keep coming back to that because this is fundamental for helping the ecosystem know the dependencies and full scope of work, both within the enterprise, which we know and do today, but now more importantly is the extended enterprise with the supply chain and your service network and everybody else. So that's with three. And then the last one I would put under the bucket of openness and flexibility. So tools that play well within the ecosystem. It's not just the engineering environment anymore. It's everything under the sun that you want to have as part of that digital thread. And then in that same bucket of flexibility, I would say, look at tools that offer deployment flexibility to support on-premise or cloud or hosted or SaaS installations. And this, I think, for us on the PTC side has been a huge driver, value driver around our offerings when companies had to resort to working from home during the COVID pandemic, right? It was like, hey, Friday, thanks, but we're not coming back on Monday. You're going to be working from home. So please take your laptop, and they were able to get onto the Windchill system just by logging into VPN, and they were up and running. So not true for all parts of the company, obviously, the manufacturing and service, but engineering was easier said than done with technology like this.
I see a question in the chat is, what is your experience with creating a new digital business model and replacing that with the current one? So in regards to capabilities, revenue, tech, etc.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a lot of that new business models are going. The point I just made about moving and helping companies get value faster. And one of the big ways that we here at PTC want to do that is getting them to cloud and SaaS-based solutions, right? So it's turn on, quick value. So that's number one. The second thing is providing the ability to have out-of-the-box solutions that are tailored, that you can measure and get value quickly and measure ROI and up and running quickly, then you can go ahead with. So as we help companies as they change their business model to offering products as a service, we also think about it the same way as how do we help them on their journey. And it's all about providing value quickly and in real time. And that's our motto here at PTC, is to help drive customer value. And we do that by embracing technologies like cloud across all of our ecosystem.
Thank you, Mark. I think another important trend is localization of content. So I wanted to bring in Dr. Urs here and ask about his perspective on how do you see the impact to global supply chain, as well as there could be a potential requirement for specific local content. So how to best accommodate these local requirements in global design?
So in wind, the factory is not the place where the final and complete assembly takes place. And it probably has never been. So it was easy for customers to say, listen, I want to get a certain share of the value added in my country. And one of the drivers of this industry shakeout was certainly the ability to make do with local content requirements. And the OEMs really know how to deal with it. And they have good tools which support them. And as said by all the other speakers, modularized designs help a lot. The really digitalized design helps a lot. PLM software helps a lot because it says something on how the product looks like and how the manufacturing process should look like. So there are tools at hand which help. By the way, the logistics costs get increasingly important in that game, and this is also a good reason to accept and to drive to some extent the local content requirements. So this is what the others refer to, Mark and others, as the supply chain integration, and it eventually pays back at the construction site where the wind turbines get installed and erected. And this is probably the final test whether the integration of the supply chain has taken place successfully. So the installation process, this means, is also a prime candidate for further digitalization. And it is part of many offerings. So local content is part of the game in wind. It has been mastered well in the past, and still companies devote a lot of attention to optimize it further, and there are tools at hand for that.
Thank you, doctors. Let's go back to the ROI and success factor discussion. And I can't stop myself from asking Mark Caldwell. I'm going to touch upon your quote in a recent ebook on Industry 4.0. You mentioned that there's a high risk for companies miscalculating their Industry 4.0 goals by sub-optimizing the business and over-optimizing a step. What is, in your view, the right measure of success?
It's definitely a complex question. What I mean is that very often we can look at the solutions in front of us that look extremely attractive, and we focus very much on them, and we get fairly short-term focused instead of being very very diligent and asking why 5 times and saying, why is that, why is that, why is that, and then focusing on that solution and determining how that brings value to the immediate thing in front of us. But it's more delayed satisfaction in some ways. But it's a really key value to be able to do that and have that kind of long-term focus and vision. So the measures get a little bit farther away from that front line, and they become more overall business effectiveness focused. And that's where we have done, as I mentioned earlier, we looked at the overall business transactional activity. That how do we believe we can improve this? How do we believe we can make this more effective? Not necessarily the individual person's task, but the overall business efficiency and effectiveness. And that's hard to measure. It's hard to evaluate, and it takes a lot of confidence that you've really achieved root cause, not just the technical root cause, but the systemic root cause, that you can then say, I truly understand that this will, when solved, affect the overall business efficiency and effectiveness. And then keep that long-term focus on that. When we went back to that initiative we mentioned earlier, that was one of the main projects that we actually changed the way we assessed business value. And when we started that, we actually took the budgets into the future and we reduced them all based on the savings we predicted up front. We didn't come back later and say, okay, yes, we've now achieved the savings, let's reduce the budget. We took it up front. We were seriously very committed across the executive team, and I would say that shows how we went about it. And it was a very inspiring thing to have that kind of commitment at a very high executive level. But they could understand they could really see where the improvement was going to come fundamentally, and what that would enable them to do in all the different parts of the value chain to bring even more value. So yes, we have done these optimizations in every step, and we are doing many of them, and so many you can't even keep track of them. But the enabler, and I think that where our business management has been very capable, has been looking at the underlying success factor and saying, we want to focus on that, we want to drive that forward, and we want to measure it on the overall business effect.
I would love to mention that if you're interested to learn more about this story and Mark's quote, you can go to the Industry 4.0 ebook, the link that we have shared with you in the chat box, and read more about this. But let me also ask Dr. Urs if you would like to add any points on what the key success factors for various actors in the years to come.
Yeah, thank you, Utkarsh. And I can build upon what Mark, Raj, and Mark told before. It is a complex environment where many areas have to be addressed at the same time. Still, these many areas do not lead to endless options for differentiation, which makes the whole game even more difficult and more complex for those who want to survive. And this means the cost obsession will remain in the market and actors have to deal with it. Digitalization is a key lever to deal with it. Productivity improvement is something which had to be pursued every day. It is not a one-time activity. It is something which has to be pursued in the morning, around noontime, in the afternoon, and in the evening. It is here, and it has to be part of every system, of every management system of a wind turbine manufacturer. At the same time, and there are two final things, wind industry has profited tremendously from the green image, and of course they stand for green electricity. However, they too have to work on green aspects. And this in particular encompasses the circularity of the products. And generate the ability that parts get recycled. Also, the use of scarce resources such as copper is important. And that a final word, this is really probably the most terrible thing in this industry is that there are still too many accidents, and many of them are very severe. And the industry has also developed an obsession to get these incidents down. And I think there's additional potential for this zero harm, zero damage culture in the years to come. And software tools will probably help further. Augmented reality will contribute to that. So it is a complex industry and it will get even more complex. And it is now high time to act.
Thank you, Dr. Urs. I think we have about 8 minutes left, so I would like to focus the last part of our discussion on the sustainability agenda. We started with sustainability, but let me bring in Mark Caldwell again. As a technology leader, Mark Caldwell, in your view, what are the key success factors for driving sustainability within the wind ecosystem?
Yeah, I would say that the key factor is our work, is our team. Our people are the strength of our company, and they're capable of making tremendous decisions. And I think the sustainability in our industry, in at least our business, is really allowing these ideas to come out, because we can make huge advancements. So one of the big focuses we have is bringing information into a way that it's trustworthy, accessible, and total value chain, so that the connectivity can be seen between a problem, a decision, and the outcome, and that is measurable. So we really have taken the focus that Mark mentioned earlier about engineering, bills and material manufacturing, service, so that we can see how things are linked to the process. The process, we can see how it's instantiated in operations, and we can bring tools like augmented reality and virtual reality to the forefront to improve visibility, training, knowledge, troubleshooting, etc. These things are coming out in our company at a very, very rapid pace to come. And it's tremendously exciting. But I think when we see sustainability, we need to make sure we give the people the right information to make the right decision. They're tremendously capable of doing that. It's just that when we don't give them that information and they don't have the proper context, they may make a suboptimal decision. So I have a really tremendous confidence in us being an extremely sustainable company. I mean, our objectives are there, the executive vision is there, the public commitment is there. but we need to empower our people with the right information and tools. And that's why we have taken a big focus in making sure that the PLM system is very well structured, very clean data, very good interfaces to other systems. We have worked on other systems as well as in our company to bring that same philosophy to them. And we see large investments around the company in that vision. So we definitely see sustainability as a core value, and I think it's very easy for us in that respect.
Empowering people is an important point. So let me bring in Mark Lobo here and ask him, how can you help Mark in managing carbon footprint for organizations?
Right. Let me kind of build on some of what Mark and the others said. When we're talking to customers about their sustainability initiatives in the context of digital technologies, let me highlight a few challenges because that kind of is critical and important. First is, how does this change from the traditional linear economy model to a circular economy model affect your product design? Think of it as the green product life cycle, right? So that's number one that is top of mind. The second one is, how do you capture the sustainable regulations, the requirements, and the company's targets, like Mark was mentioning about in your product design? When you think about zero carbon design, how do you actually make that real, and how does technology play in? And then the third challenge we've heard about is, how do you measure the full carbon footprint of your products? That is, include all aspects like material sourcing, production, logistics, usage. This value chain carbon scorer throughout the aggregation of both the internal and external data sources becomes really, really critical. So with that backdrop of the challenges, here at PTC, just like Mark said, we're also convinced that several of these challenges that we heard about, they can be addressed by optimizing and integrating or reconfiguring your available products and solutions, where you include things like PLM, 3D printing, IoT, and AR and VR. So these goals can be met by applying principles and methodologies that we support in many of our products, like design for sustainability, assembly and disassembly design, generative design, manufacturing resource optimization, sustainable procurement, and closed loop engineering. So again, we see a role of all of the technologies that we mentioned, tied to the initiative that the companies have to kind of fit in.
Thank you, Mark. And Raj, let me also ask you about what role system integrators like LTTS, L&T Technology Services, are playing in supporting sustainability initiatives. Any closing comments and advice you can offer as a leading engineering and R&D player?
Sure, Utkarsh. So I think everything that both Marks had touched upon, right? So we help many of our customers build those products in a sustainable way. How does the carbon footprint of those products reduce through electrification and so on and so forth, right? So that's sort of business as usual. And I think, as somebody else touched upon, the industry boundaries are blurring, right? So everything is an ecosystem play. Everyone has to sort of come together to build that entire value chain and provide better value to the end customer. I think system integrators like us could play a pivotal role in bringing these businesses together, creating those data exchange platforms that is oftentimes required from manufacturer to operator to other ecosystem partners. We play a very critical role, and I think LTTS is uniquely positioned because of a larger L&T heritage, right? So as you know, our power business is putting up the world's largest solar power plant. So I think there's a wealth of domain knowledge that we get from being a participant in the sustainability as well, rather than just helping with digitization. And also our investments in carbon capture and storage, our investments in ITER, the fusion energy generation and things like that. I think there is a wealth of domain knowledge plus an end-to-end value proposition that that we can take to the market that contributes to the sustainability itself. And there is a whole lot of other sustainability agenda that L&T group as a whole has that I'm sure many of you may be aware. So that would be what I think a system integrator can contribute to the betterment of humanity, if you will.
Thank you, Raj. I think that's a brilliant closing comment. And we uh, we are on the top of the hour, so we will have to bring this session to close. If you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to us. You can write to us at info@ltts.com. And our team would be happy to carry forward the conversations. The future for wind energy is very bright, and there's a lot we all can do together. So we're really looking forward to this exciting journey together. And we would like to thank all the panelists, all the participants on LinkedIn Live and on this Zoom session for joining us today. We wish you all the best. Stay well, stay safe, and we look forward to connecting with you again in future. Thank you very much for joining us today.